Well, folks, once again, the year has come around full circle. It is September 8th, 2025, Star Trek Day. It is the 59th anniversary of Star Trek's debut on television with the episode The Man Trap, which was not the pilot of the show. That didn't air until the third episode, which, of course, was Star Trek's second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before. And then, of course, the first pilot, The Cage, which canonically was used as part of the two-part episode, the only two-part TOS episode, The Menagerie, later on in the season, establishing Star Trek canon in a very interesting way. The Menagerie, and specifically The Cage, has probably become, for a rejected episode of Star Trek that the network said no to, but they did incorporate it in a fascinating way, has become the basis for basically all of modern Star Trek. Because Star Trek, since 2009, has only ever referred back to itself. It's stuck in some kind of Ouroboros or some Mobius loop of crazy uncreativity by people that need to look at other Star Trek in order to make new Star Trek, which has really never happened before in Star Trek's history since 2009. A great TV show has its own identity. Star Trek Strange New Worlds could not exist without the original series, and that in itself is a problem. And I don't presume to understand why, other than the fact that the writers really, I guess they have nothing to say about the world around us, which is so interesting because that's what Star Trek always has done best, until this show. But anyway, I wanted to jump in and read a few articles. It does not matter how hard you do your research or how accurate your spaceships are to what we think they might look like. Just by the nature of storytelling itself, it's all magic. The only crucial difference between sci-fi and fantasy is aesthetic, and that's why science fiction is so important. Science fiction is the only fantasy genre people still believe in. When you turn on a movie and watch Lord of the Rings, you get transported to another world. But it's not your world. True to Tolkien's escapism, you're only visiting, breaking out of the prison for a little while. But besides the Shire, it's not an active dream for people to work for. We can't bring Lord of the Rings into visceral reality, and no one comes away thinking elves or dwarves will be having an impact on their life. Star Trek is magic. It's about traveling and exploring and sometimes conquering. It's about setting off on a tiny ship toward the horizon, where there be monsters and demons and muttering cannibals, ancient temples to chittering computers and hidden technology. It's about mad androids and strange crystalline entities. It's about stepping on a world where everything is upside down and the people are all clones. It's about comrades in arms. It's about a crew, sometimes a family. It's about love and rage and death, the burden of command, authority, impulsivity, the desire to go out and climb the tallest mountain because it's there. It's about the good times and the bad. It's about the reckless, the braggadocious, the daring. It's about staring into the face of death and having the Reaper blink first. It's about outwitting, outracing, outfighting everyone who thought you would fail, flying higher and further than anyone has gone before. It's about plunging into the depths of hell and walking out on the other side. It's about war and peace, about struggle with your brother to the death, about good and evil men. It's about the man who rises to the hour and the villain who brings fire upon a whole world, those who persevere and the cowards. It's about finding God. It's about the prophets and the thieves and the men who cannot tell a lie and the man who can't stop lying. It's about the sweet taste of an impossible victory and the despair of a crushing defeat. It's about courage, honor, and strength. It's about friendship, brotherhood, tragedy. Look to the moments that stir the soul. It's never the dry philosophizing. It's the men. Star Trek used to be about those bigger concepts. Now it's barely about anything other than itself. Star Trek Strange New Worlds, if it has anything to say at all, it's because the writers stole something from the original series, as we've seen week after week after week this season. It's because the writers have nothing to say. They have nothing to aspire to. They can't even write an original story. All they can do is not even look at all of the entirety of Star Trek. I mean, hell, there's only one episode of the original series that had the Gorn in it. There was an animated episode, and there was a two-parter back on Enterprise in the 4th season where you got to see a Gorn again. And they were so bereft of any kind of original ideas, they decided to make the Gorn the big bad of Strange New Worlds. Because they couldn't come up with something on their own. They couldn't come up with something new. Because they don't have any good ideas. As a matter of fact, I would dare say the writing staff of Star Trek Strange New Worlds has displayed that they really have no original ideas. They're either stealing from Ursula K. Le Guin's book, Those Who Walk Away from Umlaus, or short story, pardon me, or just various episodes of Star Trek, and they don't credit the original writers. It's really perplexing to watch. And the only thing that they seem to be interested in is the interpersonal relationships of the characters because they want to turn into everything into a Joss Whedon show. Star Trek as Firefly, Star Trek as Buffy, Star Trek as Buffy, Firefly, and Angel all rolled into one. Since Star Trek 2009 and onward, Memory Alpha is a mess. They've had to figure out ways to shoehorn in all the fucking bullshit that's been written since 2009 that goes against canon. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because none of it's any good. If modern Star Trek was really good, and it's not, and they've gone out of their way, or actually they haven't gone out of their way, they've barreled straight into it, and they've just changed existing canon because they don't need to use it, or they don't feel the need. They don't want to be constrained by it, so they've just willy-nilly changed everything, which is also, I think, a huge misunderstanding of the Star Trek franchise because people who like Star Trek were very much into that fictional universe. That's why there was encyclopedias. That's why there were concordance. That's why there were star chart maps that you could look at. All of that stuff has been rendered moot. And you could say, well, Rob, ever since the advent of Next Generation, things were changing. Yes, but you had people that were working on the show that were able to exert some amount of influence. Not a lot, but enough where, because, people weren't, the art department, the Star Trek art department was kind of given a little bit more leeway to put things in. Add things in where they could caress a bump in canon, maybe smooth things over as much as they could at least. But not anymore. They're not interested. And they've ruined a franchise, I think. Because why bother? Why delve into the history of Star Trek when there is no history? They also announced Star Trek Scouts, a Nickelodeon show basically made for preschoolers that is Star Trek themed. Star Trek Scouts. Hell, when I was a scout, I was a Star Trek scout, but I was like, Cub Scouts and Weebelows and went into Boy Scouts, but I didn't stay in Boy Scouts very long. I didn't have enough time. But yet now we're getting a preschool Star Trek, which in my mind is the perfect metaphor for its 59th birthday, that the next new Star Trek TV show we're getting, even before Starfleet Academy, is Star Trek Scouts on Nickelodeon for preschoolers. There you go. But it's not good. As a matter of fact, it's really not good. So I don't know what to say. But anyway, I'm going to end this Star Trek birthday show. I want to thank you all for, once again, coming on this journey. I know I'm like a broken record. I know. I can't help it. There's so many Star Trek things in this Robservatory, things that I love so much. And I've loved Star Trek my whole life, and I've worked on it professionally. I've made a feature film with William Shatner about my obsession with Star Trek. I was a Star Trek consultant. I just want Star Trek to be good because I think our timeline needs Star Trek again. Star Trek should be... Remember, 94 was on the cover of Time magazine. Picard and Kirk were on the cover of Time. Star Trek, I don't think, was ever bigger than it was in 94. Next Generation went off the air with All Good Things. Generations, as much as I have problems with the film, came out. It was a big deal combining the two generations. Big deal. Deep Space Nine was on the air. Next Generation went off the air. Voyager was getting prepped. We will never see those days again because Star Trek is no longer telling stories that have any relevance to anybody in the audience. All it is it's a confection. You know, it's the Vegas show version of Star Trek. It's not good. The writing deserves better. We need people that read books, that have read science fiction novels, or at least read the best Star Trek novels. I guarantee you, any writer that reads The Wounded Sky would suddenly rethink what they've been doing on Star Trek Strange New Worlds and be like, wow, we could really be telling some really interesting stories. But they won't.